Okay, hello, and welcome to the Sociology Staffroom. We've got Nabihah with us today talking about 21st sociology. So, first of all, Nabihah, thank you so much for coming and spending some time to talk to us.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you for having me. Quite exciting to be on the podcast, but yes, thank you.
I'm super excited too. I know you've done some work for us as well already at Tutor Stew, looking at 21st sociology. And I thought, do you know what? This is interesting. This is something I'm interested in. I'm sure lots of other people would be interested in it. And so I've got a lot of questions around it. And I think there's also some elements of anxiety around 21st sociology, just because of the specifications, potentially whatever examples you might be working for, also the reflection on textbooks and whether it's worth
Mm,
taking that risk or not, I suppose. So my sort of first question to you, like obviously in lots of exam style questions or with reference, they refer to this like contemporary element. And a lot of students will ask me this question: what do you
mm.
understand as contemporary when there's a reference to contemporary?
I completely agree that especially AQA has specified contemporary sociology in its specification. The exam board expects to see that knowledge and other exam boards as well. And from my understanding, contemporary essentially describes what is happening currently in society. So what is happening essentially now. And when I have to teach this, I often sort of put that into sort of postmodernism. So the society we live in now can be considered postmodern. What are the current trends? What are the current patterns? Have there been any changes? And essentially, how are you showing your knowledge on the current situation in Britain and on an international scale too? What is currently happening? So, for example, when I teach divorce, I often refer to the most recent statistics and the most recent trend. And that is you showing you know exactly what's happening right now, to put that into what exactly we mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course it makes sense. So it's like keeping it sort of like, as you said, the word. I feel like we use the word contemporary a lot here, but you definitely made sense there that it's something that's
Yeah,
maybe current, that's happening both within the UK and internationally. So why
yeah.
is that so? No, obviously, there is that sort of expectation for some different examples for that, but
Mm,
why is it so important? First of all, for a student to look at contemporary, and then
mm.
secondly, why is it important for a teacher? Because obviously, there is that you know element. Yes, we know there's exams, but ultimately there is obviously a moral obligation as well, isn't there, for us to understand contemporary. So what is that important? Firstly for the students, but why also for the teachers potentially to look at that?
So with sociology, contemporary knowledge is sort of at the heart of the subject. So whether you're studying at A level or at university, you need to understand what is currently happening. So the discipline itself lends to this sort of understanding on what is currently going on and how can we explain this. It's sort of at the heart of what sociologists do, and this is what they find fascinating and interesting. So for a student, to be a sociologist, you need to understand what exactly is happening now, because the textbooks that we might be using aren't changing every year. However, society changes at a rapid pace, and what was happening a week ago is very different to what might be happening now. So, as a student, it's sort of impossible to keep up with all the trends, but to have a general understanding of where we are in terms of our attitudes, where we are in terms of the justice system. That for now, at the moment, I'm drawing my attention for my students, I'm drawing their attention towards the cost of living crisis, because that's got huge implications for the social class debate and inequality. So essentially, as a student, you got to try and keep on top of current affairs. And for a teacher, we've sort of got the subject knowledge and specialism and expertise that can allow us to filter what students should learn. So, for example, a lot of my students are quite interested in current debates on punishment, and they are grappling between, should we have prison systems or is rehabilitation the way forward? And as a subject specialist, I can show them examples of, well, what do they do around the world and what is happening now? And that would give my students a picture on punishment and what that looks like today and how it's very complex. So essentially, students do have a responsibility to keep up to date, and teachers have a responsibility to help cultivate that interest in what is happening right now and where they can get that information. Um, in a sense, by understanding what's happening now, we can sort of look towards the future and anticipate what might future trends be. And it's sociologists who are really driving that. There's no other discipline, I think, that does it in our capacity. So in a nutshell, as a student, as a teacher, and as a citizen, we do need to know what's happening right now, because it does affect our lives, and we are lucky to study it in a subject that encourages us to learn those things. So that, I think, should be a responsibility that we all sort of collectively take. Like, my students often send me stuff like, oh, I watched this episode of Black Mirror and it was really relevant to what we were looking at about social media. And it sort of is a mutual reciprocal relationship. I suggest things and they suggest things, and that can be quite a nice dynamic as well in the classroom.
Yeah, thank you. You said so many things. I just want to touch upon you said some really great things. One was like, it's, sociology, and we are fortunate and lucky, and I think we sort of to remind ourselves that our subject is moving forward, and that sociology today, I think you said, is not the same as next week as it is next year, and it will constantly change. And we're lucky to be able to do that, to keep it contemporary. And that's both important for our students, but also for us. And I think you also mentioned about this idea that our role is to cultivate that. And it's sort of nicely will come on to my next, which we'll come to in a minute. But cultivating that inquiry as well. And then the last point that you sort of elaborate was really interesting, was the fact that yes, it is important to be as students, as learners, but also you use the word as citizens. And I think that's sometimes we sort of forget that yes, there are exams, but actually we also have sociology allows us to have that I suppose that social citizen responsibility as well, to have that sense of inquiry, to keep us critical. Keeping with that thing, you said some things there of how you help to embed it, and I know that maybe I know that you've been now teaching for 6 years, and you're head of sociology within your school. There's some people at different points in their career that may be a bit nervous about embedding contemporary material. Are we going off piste a little bit? It's not that concept or that name or that piece of research is in the specification. So I suppose there's sort of two questions there. The first question is, how do you embed it? And then, can we be too contemporary that we end up becoming very just like, just casual conversations that someone who hasn't taken sociology would talk about as well. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, I suppose there's two questions. How do you embed? And then maybe like the next part is that, is there a way, how do we draw the line to keep it still sociological and not just sort of something that is sort of general chit chat?
Yeah, completely. Okay, make sure you let me know if I don't answer both sides of the question, because my mind is like buzzing right now. And I think the subject can sometimes have this sort of reputation of, it's sort of like just glorified discussion, and it's just basically, if you like to debate, then A-level sociology is for you, and we just talk about stuff. And it doesn't, it's not entirely that. It is a very academic, rigorous A-level. So I think, to answer the first part of your question about how we embed it, teachers need to make a judgment call here. So we know what it is that our students need to know. So if it is something that is essential, like when I'm teaching educational inequalities in social class, I need to show the most recent data on so did free school meal pupils do better at GCSEs compared to non-free school meal pupils? That is a trend that changes, and that is at the heart of one of the units that we study. So having that as an up-to-date sort of having an up-to-date graph or statistics, it's really easy to Google. You can go on Office of National Statistics website, and that's that done. We are lucky we just had like the census survey. So if that something from there is relevant to, if we're studying about religion or secularization, then something as simple as a statistic is quite easy to find and is often a good starting point for a topic. But on the flip side, we might be wary that, this is maybe a little bit off topic, or is a little bit different, but it's still sociological. So for that, teachers might want to encourage some reading at home, or you might want to differentiate and say, um, so everyone should read the first 3 pages, but those of you who want to push yourself, read the first 10, let's say. So you can encourage it in a more sort of in your own time, at your own pace sort of way. Now, the other sort of ways in which I often embed contemporary material is using sort of videos or news reports and news headlines. There's been times where I've actually used clips from This Morning on a woman who's had many children, and it was about new right policies on families and whether we should encourage the benefit system. So something like that was just 4 minutes long, but it got the class talking about, well, what is the role of the government when it comes to the family? Um, so I think, to answer your first question about embedding it into lessons, there's statistics, there's recent media, so whether that's news headlines or videos. And one thing that does require some commitment could be like books or contemporary film and movies that you need to dedicate time to as a teacher, but can be quite helpful for students and sort of situates the learning in their context. I, we're all very busy and I don't always have time for that, so I put that on them. And I say, you guys make a whole recommended watch list, and I'll tell the year 12s to watch it, or it can become quite collaborative and they get really excited, and they take ownership on that. So they're the ones who are engaging in social media, most of them are, who can use their expertise. Um, and the second part of your question, I knew I could.
So I had so many questions. So, I just want to wrap up on that, or just say something about the points that you made, because you said they're really important. And I thought actually, if I move to the next question, it's my thoughts for just asking so many questions. I think what you said was really good. Like, there are sort of non-negotiable things that need to be contemporary almost, is the statistics. We can't be talking about, like you mentioned, free school meals without talking about current data that might be like, something from the 1980s. Something you need something from the current day. And obviously, like you just mentioned, the census is coming out now. The next load is due out in November and December. So we need to be using that data. We can't be putting on a PowerPoint something that's historically out of date. And that's our job as a teacher to do that. The second thing you mentioned as well is the idea that you can use it as a starter activity, which is fantastic, just create that stimulus. And then applying, I think you said that, apply the theory to that. You mentioned new right. So yes, it's talking about something maybe colloquial that's on like mainstream media, but then applying that sociological bit. But then I thought the interesting bit is actually what you said as well at the end. It's not just the onus of the teacher. And then you said that actually get your students to do some of that work, because they are in touch with social media, and and do you know what? I mean, this is me sounding like an ancient person, but they are on it on some stuff. Like they are on it, and I'm not in with TikTok. Okay, what's it called again? The TikTok, the Snapchat. They're like laughing at me, but like that stuff is really blowing up in regards to sociology. I actually asked my students that question yesterday, and I said, why do you think that's blown up so big? Sociology is massive on TikTok. Like, there's a thing called, and maybe again, this is like me showing my age, but the young sociologists out there will know maybe what I'm talking about, the sociology teachers. They're doing this thing, they're talking about male gaze basically, and there's like a trend that's like dress for a man, dressing for a woman. I don't know if you've seen that. Wow. So it's all about male gaze, and the kids don't understand it. And basically, it's a 3 minutes, because it's going to be 3 minutes, can't it, or something on TikTok? And so it's like basically, I dress for a man, I dress for a, and it's just, and it's looking at films and analysing the films and just picking out clips. So the kids are like in it; they just know it, and I'm like, wow, like so. Yeah, you're right. Just give that ownership to the students, because it is. And they said to me, the reason it's happening is because of lockdown. Lockdown got everyone questioning the social. That is like I feel like there's a research project on that. Like it's like the mini enlightenment. Like, so yeah, our students. So I think you've mentioned some really important things that it isn't all about us as teachers taking responsibility for 21st stuff. It's actually throwing it and giving that ownership to the students.
And if you make it official and it seems really special, and give them all different responsibilities, like you find stuff on this unit, and it can get very, very exciting for them and really relevant to the subject. And it's a good thing for them because they're often engaging in this and they don't realize, oh, this is sociological. I'm doing what I'm doing in class. I'm literally doing it on my phone. And then before they know it, they can't run away from the subject. So it can really make it like sort of relevant and sort of, I think, contemporary for them, and they often are, you are completely right, they're often more on the ball than we are, and they are seeing these trends and they can like even like stuff like tweets. I once had a student who engaged in a really heated discussion with their parents about meritocracy, and I said, send me the screenshot of your text. And then I just put that on the board. I blurred out like the dad's number or whatever, but we were engaging with that, like, oh, he's such a functionalist, and they were using the language. So I think teachers need to just, don't feel like pressured to be up to date. The students have that asset, and putting it on them does alleviate the burden. But the things that we know as social scientists, like where's the data? I've recently used a lot of new advertising that incorporates lots of different family structures. Like there's like the McCain chips advert that has all these different family types, and what they all agree upon is that McCain chips are amazing. So I think that there's assets and expertise that we bring, and they have their own, and finding the right balance between the two. And I think the safest sort of bet when it comes to, I don't know if this is too off topic, is if you give it as homework, it removes that pressure of, I'm going to run out of time to finish the course. Like they're doing it in their own time. And I think when you start to sort of be brave with different sort of materials and videos or headlines, you start to develop a sort of way to discern, this is going to help, or this is, your class, they're going to get distracted, they're going to completely lose their mind if I show them this video, and we won't get round to that 10 marker at the end. So I think just
it's hard, especially when you're enthusiastic, hey? Like, like you said, like, especially like you can get into a little wormhole yourself in a lesson, and next minute, like 45 minutes is gone, and you talked. I think I've like literally half an hour talk about divine femininity the other day, and I was like, hang on a minute. What have I done? Like that 10 marker is not happening today.
exactly,
but then I think you said it brings joy to the lesson. Someone spoke about this the other day. I was speaking to someone about positive psychology, and the idea is bringing joy to the lesson. And actually, it might be the thing that engages students to the lesson, because the theory could be potentially dry, looking at functions and Marxism, but actually then applying it to real life is then think, sociology is real, and then like you said, then that you're not going to get that out of them. They're going to be looking at, like, you've ruined social media for them now. Like that's all they're going to be looking at.
Exactly. And if you're engaged in a really good discussion and it's getting rich, like I tend to include a stimulus maybe at the end of the topic after they've learned all the important concepts, and now they have a basis to engage in this debate. For example, when I was teaching beliefs in society, towards the end, I showed them Kanye West's spiritual service and what he was doing with, in terms of sort of singing gospel, and then they were using their key terms. Oh, is that spiritual pick and mix? Does this count as a cult? Oh, it's social solidarity, and they have the knowledge. So it sometimes it is best to sort of err on the side of caution, where I really need to teach them this first, and that's fine. Teach them that first, and come to whatever it is afterwards, and that's okay too. It really depends on your own style, and your class better than anyone. I find that if they've gotten in a really good contemporary and rich discussion, there's no harm in tying it up together and writing a little bit, and I'm going to summarize this side of the argument, and you guys chip in to help. We need to tie this together because I don't want you to lose this, and you can bring it in later in your essays or something to make it pragmatic and boring, but it's something that they'll be like, at least I took something away from that, and they'll remember it. So I think for teachers, especially where we do have this responsibility, we are teaching sociology, especially those of us who have been teaching it for a long time, we have a new cohort every year, so they are coming with their own experiences, and this is a responsibility that I think us, compared to other subjects, we do have. But just to enjoy it and make it easy for yourself, your workload, and don't feel like you have to sort of cram in as much as you can. It might be for some topics, there are some things that you are easily able to incorporate, and for others, you just leave for later. You know, there's always homework at the end of the day.
And that makes it valuable, doesn't it? That's when my homework does become valuable. Exactly what you said. I mean, it's just got, there's so much. And I thought it was really interesting that you just said that point, that maybe if we feel we know our own strengths and our own areas for development, like if it is something you feel like you need to get that content, that theory done, then they actually do that first, and then that application can happen afterwards, rather than like you bring it in as a starter or a stimulus. So that was a really valuable point you made there. Another really valuable point that you made was, you know, and I know it's something you were developing, like, around sort of the students bring that to the table, but bring it in as homework, as you said, and it's almost like we bring the theory or introduce the theory, we bring that to the party, the sociology party, the metaphoric sociological party, and they bring the studies, and not the studies, the real life examples, and then between you, you're working collaborative. Look, I'm saying again, I've just left my bracing, by the way. I didn't take it out today. You're working in a collaborative way rather than, you know, working for the students, and you're doing like 100% of the work, and they're part of that journey instead. So there's so many sort of just useful tips just to remind us. It's actually something we shouldn't be frightened of doing. And if we need to, we use it as part of our sort of flipped learning, rather than something that comes into the lesson. So thinking about this, you know, I know I'm conscious that of time. I can see you're at work yourself, you're teaching. So I'm like, okay, I'm very, very lucky to have your time. I feel like that I should teach with you. I thought we'd have a really good time. I think we'd like have really fun lessons. We should teach one day. We'd have a really good fun. We probably won't get much done, but we'd have a really good time. The students would love it. What studies? I mean, we've talked a lot about examples. Are there particular studies that are socially, like you said, some of the texts, not all. Research is coming out all the time. Are there any particular contemporary 21st sociologists that you think, you know, let's get us the students on, we should introduce into this? Is there one that you think, right, your top three, or am I giving you so much of a quota there?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I would say in terms of research, it I found actually that it's hard because not everyone would have the time for this, but when I plan my lessons, I will look at sort of multiple textbooks on the same topic, and that can often be quite helpful to be like, oh, I usually use this textbook, and this, you know, Harold Lambus has got something that I don't usually incorporate. That's usually quite a helpful source for me. But in terms of like names, so I remember Pereira, she did a whole sort of covert research, pretended to be like a year 8 student, and basically was trying to find out gender differences in school, and how there are differences in people interactions, and to what extent that sort of lends itself to a gendered experience of education. But I, like the rest of you, probably rely on to you to supply me with some of this stuff. So we've actually got quite a helpful breakdown on some recent contemporary research. There was some really helpful stuff in The Guardian, specifically about domestic division of labour and COVID. And that, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but that was some really helpful insights into how COVID actually exacerbated the triple shift, and that women essentially were just confined to the domestic sphere and were having to work and do everything else from the home, and this was a burden that only they were facing. And the other thing that I've actually started to recently use is LSE releases reading lists on different topics, and it's like a blog, and it's really helpful, especially for those of you who do UCAS references as well. They release sort of recommended readings on different things. So I was just suggesting some stuff to a student who wanted to know more about race in relation to crime, and that's something she's really interested in. And there was this book that was done regarding Muslims in Bradford and sort of policing involved in sort of communities up north. And that can be really helpful for teachers and for students. I just sent her the link and she tried to find a book that she would like. But that can be really helpful for staff or for teachers as well, to find out some more up-to-date research and some more up to date studies that have been produced, and it's all been sort of it's all authentic and real and sociological. So
No,
that,
that's important because it's that authenticity, isn't it, sometimes as
yeah,
well? And that's a really valid point
yeah,
that you just said. Like, the LSE does a reading list. I know that they also do some free webinars as well.
yeah,
So they're really important. And obviously using sort of I don't try not to market here, but the scholar element of like
yeah,
a certain search engine. They could bring up free journal articles as well, and I think often with the newspapers as well, they reference the study, and you've got a hyperlink to that study. So there's quite a lot of
yeah.
different ways. And again, I suppose you could obviously it's a lot for a teacher to do, but like you said, you can get to
Mm.
students to do that if they want to further develop their understanding of that, like you did with the student wanted to know about. I'm still curious of how that study of how they pretend to be an year eight student. I don't know
Oh
how that went
yeah.
down.
I'm still trying to figure that out. I think she just had like youthful appearance and she managed to covertly blend into this cohort. But she was with them for like a good I want to say a few weeks, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but she managed to immerse herself into the environment. And I often get the question a lot when I'm teaching about ethical guidelines and deception.
Mm.
And it's like, it goes through a board and sometimes it does get approved if you know how to sort of conduct your research and you know how to explain what you're doing isn't unethical. But it's they sometimes are so used to just the findings of certain studies and knowing how this was uncovered and how this was revealed, that is equally an important process. But yeah, I have no idea how she managed to do
That's interesting. I feel like that's my new question for today. There's lots of great ideas that you've shared with me today, and thank you for your time. I appreciate that you've got to go off and carry on teaching for the
that.
day. But thank you. I think it's given me some more bravery to look at some more contemporary research and putting that ownership on students as well, not just on the teachers. So thank you so much for your time. I've loved speaking to you.
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
love your enthusiasm for sociology as
Oh,
well. So thank you. So have a lovely day, and I hope
you
that
too.
is it your last lesson today? You got one more to go, or
I actually have to babysit some kids playing some board games, so that'll be
okay?
fun, and then I'm done.
Oh well, enjoy, maybe partake as well. But
Yeah.
thank you ever so much for your time, and thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. This has been really insightful for me as well. Thank
Oh, thank
you.
you. You take care. Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
You too, Katie. Bye, bye, bye.